Again. This is video 2 of our series working on the beginner to-do list, mastering ColdFusion as a beginner, starting from the very basics of getting something set up so that you kind of understand. The only way to be able to drive is to drive. You've got to be able to get in there and start coding. So the first thing we want to do is to log into the ColdFusion administrator. Unless you have a port that's blocked, it always goes to localhost :8500/cfide/administrator/index.cfm. You put in your password for your administrator login. Once you've logged in, you go to data sources, and then you put in to-do list is what I'm using, and we are going to use CF Derby, Apache Derby. When you go to work at a job, you'll probably have Microsoft SQL, Oracle, Sybase, or MySQL, or Progressive SQL, or something else. So you'll be able to pick which one of these. Now, a lot of jobs will already have the website set up, but if it's a brand new and you're needing to know how to do it, it's a good thing to pick your own. If you've got MySQL or Oracle or SQL Server installed in your machine, you could try that. But what we're going to do is we're going to do Apache Derby. We're going to click Add. And now we want to go to where this should go. This should go to ColdFusion 2023. And then CFusion. And then DB. Let me scroll down to DB. DB. Click OK. But we need that name on the end, so I like to keep it named exactly the same as the name of the database. Create database. This is just an example. So I've got that. I click Submit, and it's successfully created, so I've got that done. So now we want to open up our ColdFusion IDE. What we're using for it, for me, that I like to use, you can use whatever tool you want to use, is I'm going to use the Visual Studio Code. So I go to the same thing. I go to ColdFusion 2023, CFusion, but I go to www.root, and then I create a folder, which I've already created, CF to-do list. It has nothing in it, so there's nothing to worry about. We're going to create a file called the application.cfc. What the application.cfc does is when you're running a ColdFusion page, it will always run the application.cfc. Now, if you're several layers down in a folder, it will literally see if there's an application CFC in the current folder. If there isn't, it will move up to the next folder until it reaches a folder that has an application.cfc. So you need to be real careful how you use them. You should probably only have one per project. Obviously, there are people who do more advanced things, but you're a beginner. You want to follow beginner guidelines. Keep your training wheels on. Be careful how you do things. We're going to keep everything simple. You do want an uppercase C. So now we've got an application at CFC. It's empty. I have snippets of code. If you need those, I can teach that, how you can get your own snippets. So I can just say app, and I have a couple different ones there I can use. The ColdFusion application.cfc is the one I'm going to use. So now I simply change the name of it to CF to-do list. And as I recall, the name of the data source at this particular time, let's go back and look, was CF to-do list. So if we look right here and scroll down, CF to-do list. So now we can go back here, and we have the title of this application, the data source of this application. The rest of this is going to not need to be totally understood. This is going to create an application time. It's going to hold the data in an application for 30 days because once you've built an application, you really should not be using application variables very limited times, and it should be something that's going to stand for a long time, like the name of the application. Session storage, I've got turned on to true and currently set for 1 hour, 60 minutes. You can adjust that as you get better, but for now, let's not touch it. I will work on getting a snippet of code somewhere where I can give you this so you don't have to type it. But if you want to type it, you can definitely do that. You might want to pause the screen, and then I'll scroll down, let you see the last little bit down here. Now, from there, we're going to create an index.cfm. That's kind of like the index.htm when you're building a web page for your first time in a folder. That tends to be the file that would come up. In a ColdFusion program, index.cfm is going to come up. Now, you can type exclamation, or I've got mine set to doc for the HTML5 boilerplate. And I'm going to say I want this to be the ColdFusion to-do list. Now, when you're spelling the word ColdFusion, you want to make it one word, capital C, capital F. That's how it's been spelled over the years. So if you see someone with a cold space fusion, they need to remove the space because that's not the right way to spell it. So this is going to be where we're going to put our list. So now, if I go back to the browser and I simply copy this and let's paste here, and we will delete everything back but the CF to-do list. Whoops. CF to-do list. Hit enter. We see over here list. Now, as a programmer, I tend to like dark mode, so this is awfully bright on my screen, but we will work on it. I will zoom in a little so you can see its list. Now, what we're going to do is we want to make this to-do list simple and then increase and make it better as we go. So first things we need to do is do that creating of a SQL statement that we can use to create the table. So back here on the VS Code, what we want to do first is we want to be able to create the table. So let's first understand when you're writing a query in ColdFusion, it's not like other languages. Just understand you don't have to remember when to open and close it like you would in some other languages. So let's just do CF query. This means I'm going to write a SQL statement. I want to write a query to get information or to create information, insert, update, delete. So what we're going to do is we're going to name this create table, which you technically don't have to name it because there's no results going to return that you need to have access to. And so we're going to simply do CF query, and then we're going to select and drop in a table that we're going to want to create. We're going to want to generate as an identity. We don't really need created at, I guess, not for this simple of an example. So, and I'll leave it at 255, even though most of these examples will not be that long. So let me hit save, and let's go back to the browser, and let's hit refresh. Now let's go back to our code editor. It should have created the table. I didn't see any errors. So now what we want to do is simply get a list of tasks. We want to see what the list of tasks are. So what we want to do is say select everything from the table named tasks. So we delete everything else. And so now we have select everything from tasks. But what we want to do, there's a debug tool that will help you when you're first starting to code. CF dump. Give me the dump of variable you put hashtags around a variable to be able to access the data that's inside the variable. So you take the word tasks, because that's the name of the query that we're doing. Hit save. Then we go back to the ColdFusion browser, the browser, whichever one you have. Hit refresh, and there is, it shows it's got the ID and the name in the database. So we now have a table, and here it's showing it and showing it empty. So the only thing we have is ID and name. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our ColdFusion editor. We're going to say we want this to be getting us the list of tasks. So what we want to do is something quite simple. Let's simply say CF output. This is how you can output data coming from a query or other variables. So we want to say query tasks, and then we want to say into the CF output, and all we want to do is put the name. And so that the name doesn't just simply stack next to each other, we want to put a line break so we can see all the names. So let's do that. Let's go back to the browser, hit refresh, and I messed up on the output. Let me go back and look. Oh, I see. CF out. So I gotta change this to output. Hit refresh, and it's empty because there is nothing. So what we need to do is to be able to insert something. So I could create an insert, but I could create, a form to do the insert, but for this first task, let's just duplicate that and say we're going to insert into tasks, and then we want a value. So the value we're going to do is milk. No, get milk. How about that? So we're going to run this, but let's run this before we get the list of tasks, so we can insert milk this one time and get the task so we can actually see it coming out. Now remember, this is the beginner way of doing things. If there are some things that are going on that as a programmer I look at, I'm like, well, but as a beginner, you're going to insert, you're going to get the task, you're going to display them. We hit refresh once, don't hit it twice. You can, but it'll just keep adding get milk every time. So now we'll come back here. We'll get rid of the insert for now. So now when we hit this page, we'll always be able to get the list, which happens to just be get milk.